One of the best things for low back pain when you're going through it, especially when it is unbearable. So let's say 7 out of 10 or higher. One of the best things you can do is move. And I know that sounds counterproductive. And I know that one of the most popular recommendations is to rest. And I don't necessarily think rest is a bad idea, but we have to get on the same page of what we actually mean by rest. So when I say rest, I'm not thinking bedridden. I'm thinking more of like an active recovery. Welcome to another episode of the Build Beyond podcast. This podcast exists to challenge and guide you so that you can reach your full potential. Today, I'm going to talk about low back pain and rest. These are two topics that I've talked about before in previous episodes. I talk a lot about them on social media as well. But I think it's an interesting thought, and maybe it's a unique perspective to some people. But this is based on a conversation that I was having with someone the other day. And I thought the information would be, valuable to a lot of different people, because I think this may be a perspective of low back pain that a lot of people don't think about. So this episode is perfect for you if you have chronic low back pain that comes and goes and it feels like nothing you're doing is working. I do believe, although we're talking about low back pain specifically, this information will probably work for a lot of different injuries. There's some that it won't work for, but for most things, this general concept, even if it doesn't work, I think it's valuable. It's something to think about, especially if you're in a period of no pain, but you know that pain is coming at some point. So let's talk about low back pain. One of the best things for low back pain when you're going through it, especially when it is unbearable. So let's say 7 out of 10 or higher. One of the best things you can do is move. And I know that sounds counterproductive. And I know that one of the most popular recommendations is to rest. And I don't necessarily think rest is a bad idea, but we have to get on the same page of what we actually mean by rest. So when I say rest, I'm not thinking bedridden or sitting down. I'm thinking more of like an active recovery. So we are continuing to move. We might even continue going to the gym and doing a lot of different things, but we're going to tone the intensity way down. And one of the best ways to do that for low back pain specifically, but again, this can work for a lot of different things, is by walking. And that might sound crazy, but I'm telling you, for a lot of people, myself included, increasing my step count when I'm going through an episode of even severe low back pain helps me recover faster, and it helps me get through my day. It helps me reduce the pain. It helps me increase my range of motion and increase my movement. It also keeps me healthy while I'm in pain, because I could have an episode of low back pain that could last for weeks. I maybe even be struggling with it for a month. And you think about, okay, a month of rest, I'm decreasing my physical activity. So I'm increasing my risk for things like heart disease, diabetes, some kinds of cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia. It's affecting my immune system. So I'm going to be more susceptible to infection. And it might, even if I get infected, it might take me longer to recover. The symptoms might be more intense. My sleep's going to be affected. My mood's going to be affected. My energy levels are going to be affected. So what I want to do is, just in life in general, when I'm not struggling with low back pain, I want my physical activity levels to be high. When I'm going through low back pain, those physical activity levels may have to come down, or they may have to shift a little bit, but I don't want them to go to zero. So for me, personally, when I think of rest, I'm not thinking bedridden. I'm not thinking no movement. I'm thinking active recovery. So it's modified movement. And walking tends to be a great active recovery exercise for low back pain. Here's the interesting part though. Let's say that you are an active person. So how are we going to define active? Let's say you get in some type of resistance training 2 to 3 days per week. That may not even be going to the gym. It may just be waking up and knocking out some push-ups. You also get in some cardio. Maybe you like to go to hot yoga, and it jacks your heart rate up, or maybe you like to get on a bike, or maybe you like to jog, or you walk briskly, you walk your dog, things like that. So you're getting that moderate to vigorous heart rate, right? And maybe you're doing that let's say you're not meeting physical activity guidelines, but you're getting like 30 plus minutes per week. Also, you're getting in a relatively high step count. So you're getting 8,000 or more steps per day. So if that's you, and then you're going through low back pain and you're talking to me, and I say, okay, we are going to tone it down. We're going to rest. But what I'm saying is active recovery. So we're going to reduce everything down, but we're going to keep that step count relatively high. For you, relatively, we are reducing physical activity. But here's the tricky part. Let's talk about someone on the other end of the spectrum. So maybe you are someone who doesn't resistance train. You don't even do body weight stuff. You don't go to the gym. You don't do push-ups. You don't do squats. No resistance training. That is like 80% of the people who I come in contact with. And then maybe you don't really do any cardio. So you are not doing any type of moderate to vigorous activity that's elevating your heart rate. And let's say you're largely sedentary based on your step count. So I'm going to say that's 4,000 steps or lower. Now you might say, I don't even know what's the equivalent. So here's 4,000 steps or less, because I fall into this category if I am not consciously trying to increase my step count, especially in the wintertime. So if you wake up and you drive to and from work, you do stuff around the house, when you get to work, you sit, but you walk around your workplace here and there. You might stand a little bit, maybe you even have a decent amount of movement during your work. And then on your drive home, maybe you go to the grocery store, maybe you take the kids to a sporting event and you do stuff around the house. That's about 4,000 steps per day for me. And I think, keep in mind, I'm a chiropractor and I'm a sports chiropractor. So I'm more of like sports performance and rehab. So I'm in a gym most of the time. So you would think my step count's pretty high. It's not. I don't really move. I stay kind of in a tight area for the most part. I'm not walking a ton and I do sit a lot. So I think it's kind of deceiving. People think, oh, I move more than I actually do. Not when you actually track your steps. So I think there are a lot of people out there who are taking 4,000 steps or fewer who don't think they are. They're overestimating their step count. So let's say that's you. You don't strength train. There's no resistance training. You're not doing moderate to vigorous cardio pretty much ever, and you've got a relatively low step count. Now you're going through an episode of low back pain and you come to someone like me and you ask for help, and I'm like, okay, we are going to rest, but by rest, I'm talking about active recovery. So I need you to get, let's say, 8,000 steps per day. Well, relative to what you were doing, I'm actually increasing your physical activity. Now, for some people, it actually does work, but for other people, injury and pain is not the time to jack up your physical activity, because now we have to deal with muscle soreness. We have to deal with joint soreness. You got low back pain, but we might be affecting your knees or your ankles because they're not used to that many steps. So in that case, and this happens from time to time, probably more often than I would like, is I have someone come in for low back pain and they lack the basic physical fitness and standard physical activity to perform the active recovery that's going to best help them get through and manage low back pain. So they're almost not fit enough to do rehab, or they're not fit enough to do active care. They're not fit enough to rest, it's in other words. And that's an interesting thing to think about, because if you don't have the motivation to exercise and you don't have the motivation to move, you might want to think about this, because you might want to think, well, how am I going to be able to manage once I'm in pain? Because pain is inevitable. I think when people come to me and I say, what are your goals? And I want to get out of pain. Well, I'm not the person for you. If you want out of pain, you got to go talk to a medical doctor about an injection or an opioid, because that's the only way I feel like we can actually delete pain. We can dope you up. I have people who do completely get out of pain, but I can't really predict that. So what I do is I help people manage the symptoms, we reduce them, and then we help get them back to activity. Ideally, the goal is to get them out of pain. I would hope that would happen, but I can never promise that. It's a hard thing to promise. So pain is inevitable. It is a human experience. You're going to go through physical pain. It is just what it is. You don't have a choice I would argue that you don't have a choice whether or not you experience pain. Pain is the standard. Now, that sounds depressing, but if we can wrap our minds around that physical pain, muscle pain, joint pain, tendon pain, these things are coming, then we have choices. How do we want to be physically when we go through the pain? Do we want to be physically fit and relatively healthy and active so that we can take advantage of a lot of these active care opportunities, and then you can keep moving and keep improving your health, or at least maintaining your health while you're injured and while you're in pain? Or do you want to be relatively unhealthy, sedentary, physically weak, low VO2 max, poor cardio, and then on top of that, you have to go through physical pain, and then you have someone like me saying, hey, you need to walk more, and the walking is just crushing your knees and your ankles and just making it hard, and just everything compounds and makes it worse. And another thing to think about is illness as well. And we saw this with COVID. Illness is inevitable. So we're all going to get sick, at least a viral infection. It's just going to happen, whether it's COVID, flu. There's all kinds of stuff that happens. So how do you want to be when you get sick? And what happens if you get sick and you have low back pain? Because those usually go hand in hand for me. So now I've got to deal with the virus and I've got to deal with low back pain. And I'll tell you what, when I have low back pain, I still have to pick things up. I have little kids. I still got to move around. So for me, being able to lunge and take a knee is important. And I cannot tell you how many people, I'm in my 40s, I'm in my mid 40s now, in their mid 40s and above, struggle to take a knee. It is hard mobility wise to get down, and strength wise and balance wise, it's almost impossible to get back up. So if you can't just with minimal effort get in and out of a lunge or get in and out of a squat unloaded, I'm just talking body weight, I'm not talking high rep, I'm just talking 1 to 2 reps. If that's hard for you, well, you have to consider how hard is that going to be when you are sick, because that's inevitable, or when you're dealing with some type of spine pain or joint pain. It's going to be hard. It's going to be harder than it needs to be. So if you're lacking motivation and you're not out there, you're not strength training, you're not doing cardio, you're not getting in your step count, maybe part of your motivation could be to prepare for when you are in pain, for when you are injured, or for when you are sick. Because if you lack the basic physical fitness and the basic physical abilities, it might actually be hard to take advantage of all of your options to help you manage pain, like walking or rehab, because a lot of rehab is like mobility and exercise and things like that. And if you're having to deal with delayed onset muscle soreness because you don't do any exercise, well, that's hard. You can still do the rehab. We can still modify it. I'm not saying that those sedentary people can't work with me. I have a million ways to work around it, but it's harder because you're starting from down here when you could be starting from up here. And it doesn't really take a lot. Can you imagine if every morning you woke up and you did 10 push-ups, 10 squats, and 10 lunges? That would probably take 30 to 60 seconds and not very much energy. And there might be a little bit of soreness the first couple days, but let's just say you did that for your whole life. And then all of a sudden you're 70 and you're still waking up, knocking out lunges and squats and push-ups. It's like investing in a 401k. You try and invest in your retirement. You start relatively young, or you start whenever you think about it. The sooner you start, the less aggressive you have to be, the less you have to put into it, the less you feel it, that investment. And then the more that interest would compound over time. But if you start later in life, you got to be more aggressive. It's going to be more uncomfortable. So does that mean it's hopeless if you're listening to this and you're an older person? No, it's just, you just have to accept where you are, and it's never going to get easier than it is today. So even if you're like, I'm 60, what's the point? Well, hopefully you're going to live to be 80 or 90. So the point is that if you start today at 60, it will be easier and you will have more benefit than if you start at 61 or 62. So wherever you are, we can't go back in time. Today is the day. Knock out a couple push-ups, knock out a couple lunges, hold a plank, do something that you wouldn't normally do. Take some extra steps. Make sure your knees and your ankles and your hips and your muscles are used to walking. You don't have to put a weighted vest on or a heavy backpack or go fast. Just add some steps. Park in a parking lot the farthest spot away every time. Just do that and you'll add steps. And then build on that. Maybe add a couple push-ups. It doesn't have to be this huge shift. You just make these small incremental changes and it can pay off. It can really pay off in times of illness, in times of pain, or in times of injury. I hope this helps, and I will talk to you later. Thanks for listening.